I'm at B-Sides Bloomington with the legendary Jeff Mann on this Glassof0J. Do you know what time it is?
This looks closer to urban.
So we're at B-Sides Bloomington here, and I've known you for, how long have we known each other now? Probably since at least, I think Circle City Con 4, I think that would be like 2016, 2017,
I think
somewhere
my first
around there.
Circle City Con was 2015.
Yeah.
What was the...
That was Game of Poems, I think.
So I was there before Game of Poems.
Oh, so Circle City Con 2 was kind of that circle logo that looked like a power
was
logo
on a white shirt?
Side. Yes.
Yeah, I got that.
So Circle 2.
So Circle 2.
Close to an OG.
So is that 14?
Yeah, that was 2014. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was
One
a
of
very
those
fun year.
It might have been. I think, give or take 10 years. How long are we going to try to figure it out?
Absolutely.
What month was it?
Right. What day? What hour? Express it in epic time.
I just remember, I think I was at DEF CON and I was hanging out with Bearsec, and I was expressing an interest in speaking at a conference, and he told me about Circle City Con. I was like, you would let me speak there? He said, oh yeah, absolutely. So I did.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I did the workshop first.
Maybe you did, because one of your workshops I know was Jedi Mind Trick, but I think also you did. Did you do a workshop on Lessons from the Crypt or something? Tales from the Crypt? I know you did talks for that for a little bit.
It was a talk, Tales from the Crypt, but I did the variation of the Art of the Jedi Mind Trick workshop a couple times at Circle City Con.
Yeah.
My ultimate goal was to do 2 days, and the first day basically give homework assignment and have the class come in the second day and do a short talk.
Yeah.
Never quite worked out that way. Actually, no, I think I did it a third time. And I did
Yeah.
do that.
Okay. Yeah. I think it was Circle City Con 6 maybe.
Anyway, it's been at least 10 years.
Gosh, now 10 years ago sounds like hacker history to me. And it feels weird me saying that as young as I am, that it's like that's a part of hacker history. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you've been here for the whole of it, really. So kind of tell me where you kind of started intersecting with the hacker world, because you kind of predate that entire phenomena as it rose in the social zeitgeist.
Right. So I got into pen testing and ethical hacking in the early 90s. I happened to work for a certain 3-letter agency. Most people know that story. I'll hold on to it. How's that? And there really wasn't much in the way of conferences or anything like that back then. There were no degrees. There were no certifications. Well, there were IT-related certifications. Did pen testing for the government for a few years and out in the private sector for a few more years. This spans the 1990s. Really got out of pen testing about 2004, which was really when a lot of the hacker conferences were starting to kind of pick up. I got out of pen testing because there were younger people that were just more into it. I had fun doing it, but I wasn't creating O-days. I was mostly, back in those days, it was mostly knowing how the operating systems work and the applications and the function calls worked. And a lot of the early hacking was just basically features.
Right.
You can argue that a lot of it today is still features or misconfigurations. But I was frustrated because I would go into a client and give them a pen test and tell them what was wrong. In the early days, it was, if we tell you what your problems are, you'll fix them and then you'll be secure. That hasn't really worked out a whole lot. But there's still a mentality that that's the ultimate sort of litmus test, is to do the pen test. That's when you'll find the real vulnerabilities, the ones that really can be exploited, and that's sort of where the rubber hits the road. Except for most companies can't afford that, nor should they, in my opinion, spend their scant resources starting with that. That to me should always be okay, let's see how well you've done setting up your security program, doing all the other things that you need to do, and let's test your defenses. But I digress. I got away from that because I was frustrated that companies weren't changing. They weren't doing anything differently. We'd be breaking in 6 months later the same way we'd broken in 6 months prior. And I was trying to look for a way to help my clients understand the need to do security. And along that time, this thing called the PCI Data Security Standard was published, and I was working for a company at the time that said, hey, read this, we're going to do it. The original standard, version 1.0, was 17 pages long. It was pretty short.
Read it and understand it.
Read it, understand it, and I read it, and it's like, this kind of covers a broad base of all the things you should do to secure a network, secure an organization, secure an environment. And I was like, this makes sense. This is kind of what I've been trying to get people to do for the last 7 or 8 years being in the private sector. So I kind of got away from what was the hacker community. But even when I was involved with it, there was this perception that there were uber hackers out there, really, really smart people that were creating all the hacks and exploits, we called them back then, and people that were doing the research and figuring out how to break all the things where, those of us that benefited from it were not much more than script kiddies. And I did a little bit more than that, but, there was still, somebody figured out how to exploit this. How can we make that work type of thing for us and for our particular client? I wouldn't say that I had imposter syndrome, but it was kind of along those lines. I thought there was people out there that were that much smarter than me, and they could write all this stuff and do all this stuff. Guys that I worked with, one of the last pen tests I did, we were on site. I was with one of my coworkers. So we were a small team, and we were doing pen testing from the inside, and we were just both doing it on our own. And I had found, this is back in the Unix days, where I'd found some vulnerable X services, so I'd installed a keylogger on a couple servers and was waiting to capture credentials and doing a screen capture. And we got together to share notes at lunchtime, and I said, well, this is what I found. And the guy said, oh yeah, I saw that. So I quick wrote a Perl script or a Python script, I think it was, and I've captured 90 servers doing that. And I'm like, okay, I give up. You win. That's much more efficient than me. But I like to doing things manually by hand.
Because nowadays, I mean, when you look at it, there's way too many of those types of exploits and hacks and everything to do things by hand, to assess and to really get a full picture of the weaknesses that exist that are open for you. You have to use automated tools.
How many talks that I've heard from at how many conferences over the last 10 years of how to be a pen tester, how to set up a pen test lab, and it's like, install this tool, install this tool, install
right,
this
it's
tool,
all tools,
install this tool, run it. And I'm kind of like, where's the fun of that? I mean, back when I was at NSA, I for the earlier part of my career, I was a cryptanalyst, so I was working on ops trying to break codes or break ciphers, and I actually was fortunate enough to break a couple ciphers. I hated it because once I broke it, I had to turn all my notes over and working papers, as it were, to a programming shop, and then they would write a program to automate it. So I never got to break the cipher by hand again. It got automated. And I was like, where's the fun in that? So I've always kind of hated technology because it takes the fun out of what I
well, you solved the puzzle once, and now you never get to solve it again.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's sort of been at the back of my mind through all of this. So I walked away at 2004, where a lot of this didn't exist yet, and I didn't get back into it until roughly 10 years later, when I went to work for a product vendor, and they said, we want you to go out and be one of our evangelists and start going to conferences. And I was initially like, oh my God, how has the industry advanced in 10 years since I've been away from it? The hackers must be so much better now. And I started going to conferences and going to talks and listening to people, and I'm like, wow, not a whole lot has changed. One of my first talks that I went to that actually inspired the first talk I gave as a conference speaker was, I forget which DerbyCon was it, but Ed Scotus, which was a name I recognized, knew he was a big deal, but hadn't met him at that point. He was giving a keynote, how to give the world's best pen test. I thought, this is perfect. I'll get to see how pen testing has evolved over the last 10 years since I've been away from it. And I was really, really disappointed in his talk, because I was sitting there thinking, okay, what's evolved in terms of methodologies and goals or objectives in a pen test, and he never really articulated that. His message was basically the world's best pen test is you have unlimited time, unlimited resources, and get lots of juicy results. And I was actually getting a little bit pissed. And by the way, I've had this conversation with Ed, so this is I'm not
blood here.
I'm not trolling him, and we'll get to that. But I was sitting there thinking, my idea of a perfect pen test is you fail.
Yeah.
Or you get detected early and thus
Right.
fail. That to me is the world.
Because it's about the value at the customer's end, right?
Right.
It's like, hey,
not how much fun you can have. Now, granted,
Right.
I've been there and I've had the fun, and it's back in the day it was mostly Unix, so we called it the root dance. We got root on a box. Now it's popping boxes and getting the AD domain,
getting creds without authentication, getting details.
It's the same concept. There is a thrill of, ooh, I've got all the power now. But out of that, hearing him talk and being frustrated with it, I put together a talk on, do we still need pen testing? I basically articulated, this is my idea of what a good pen test is. And I'd also been influenced over this 10-year span by the PCI Data Security Standard, which is 12 requirements that roughly there's a progression that goes from build a secure network and secure environment, build secure systems and servers, and then you protect the data that you care about, whether it's at rest or it's in transit. You protect with that nowadays anti-malware, EDR, MDR, whatever you've seen. In those days it was just antivirus. But keep the things safe, do secure application development, which, by the way, those two requirements, the antivirus, anti-malware, and patch all your systems in within 30 days for critical security patches, and do secure program development and check your code. That's what PCI calls vulnerability management.
Right.
Then you go on to basically access control, make sure everybody has an ID so you can track them, physical security, data centers, computer rooms. Then you get into forensics, making sure everything's logged, making sure you've got a centralized logging server. Everything that's logged is immediately written off to a centralized logging server, and you're inspecting and reviewing the logs on the daily.
All up until that point, everything is what I think you and I were discussing earlier as
secure
the secure
ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then those last two bits start getting into the security.
Yeah. So requirement
active.
10 in PCI is the logging and monitoring, and 11 is all the security testing.
Yeah.
Vulnerability scanning, internal and external penetration testing,
Evaluating those
internal,
logs.
external, wireless war driving, looking for rogue wireless access points, file integrity monitoring, intrusion detection, all the security things is wrapped up into 11 on logging and monitoring. So 10 and 11 are really the security aspects of the PCI Data Security Standard. The secure ing, and then the security, and requirement 12 to wrap it all up is make sure everything you're doing is written down.
Which I think really just goes to show, like 80% of security that people think of security is about the hygiene. It's about the good practices of just operating your stuff.
It's about the stuff that's boring.
Yes.
That nobody likes to talk about, that nobody cares about. There's no money. I've had so many conversations with people that are entrepreneurs, and we get down to, usually over drinks, and we get really down to the core of what matters, and I'll talk about my opinions of how it needs to be process driven and people need to know what they're doing, and I'll get shrugs of, but there's no money in that. I'm like, well, okay.
Yeah, there's money to lose.
There's money to lose. But the progression is you secure everything, you keep it secure, and you got the monitoring and logging in place. And then when you get around to vulnerability scanning, it's mostly a safety net check, because we all know that nothing works perfectly. So you want to make sure you catch
it's that audit.
And then the ultimate live fire test is the pen test. But nobody does it like that.
Right.
Somehow the vulnerability scanning has become how you discover vulnerabilities in your environment, which I think is bullshit. Can I say bullshit on this show?
Yes, you can.
That
we say fuck.
We have a whole. Well, we're fucked because this is bullshit. Because if you're relying on a vulnerability scanner to detect problems in your environment and vulnerabilities in your environment, you've already lost because of just if nothing else, the time delay that's involved.
Yeah.
And yet that's That's what the vulnerability management industry, which is in the process of rebranding itself to risk management.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've moved on to cyber threat exposure management now. We left risk-based vulnerability
because we have
management
to have
back.
some new and sexy way of
That's
repackaging
right.
things to keep our investors happy.
That's right.
And the shareholders happy.
So,
And it very little of it has to do with actually securing the environments of the customers that we work about. Am I sounding cynical? I am.
A
a curmudgeon.
Yeah,
And
I
does
think
come
that's
out every once in a while.
and I think that's interesting, and kind of why I think you find a bit more of a home in the hacker world, because you said you came back to it around 2014ish.
Oh yeah, so I came back to it.
Yeah,
Ed Scos was one of the first people I heard speak. I had the very fortunate honor of having Jack Daniel take me under his wing, and he worked at. So I went to work for Tenable. He worked at Tenable, and the first day I met him, I had no idea who he was.
Right.
I sat next to him. We were both in the marketing department, and we were at an all hands meeting. And I walked into the room. Big conference table, seats 30 people. I'm like, that looks interesting. So I went and sat next to him. He knew who I was. He had already vetted me.
Oh, wow.
And he had already checked me out, and I passed his sniff test. So he took me under his wing for the next couple of years, introducing me to everybody in the hacker community and saying, he's one of us. He's okay.
Because really you kind of came with more of that spooky, like, oh no, you're a compliance person. Oh, right. you're the, and compliance
it's not
isn't
even spooky.
security.
It was more of it's more like a scarlet letter.
Yeah. It's like, you're just compliance.
It's the Red Sea, or I'm an auditor.
You're a checklist junkie. You're a checklist junkie.
Right.
Jockey.
And it took me, and I have fought that the whole time, the 10 years that I've been back. And I have finally gotten people to come around. Even Paul Asadorian, Paul in Paul's Security Weekly, has come around. And up until version 4 came out and they renumbered everything, he was starting to know what some of the requirements were for vulnerability scanning and pen testing. I'm so proud of him. But he also came around in understanding that if you're going to do security right in this world, you have to follow some sort of a standard or framework. And PCI is a pretty darn good place to start. And it's 20 years old now. It's over 20 years old now. And it's really made a significant impact in our industry, if not our world. And I would venture so far as to say it has been the most influential thing in our industry and changed my mind. I do a whole talk on that. I'm giving the talk sort of the defense of PCI. Why do I talk about PCI all the time on the podcast? I thought I should give a talk on that sometime.
No.
So
well, I mean,
that's the talk I'm giving at GERCON.
When the banks essentially force all of their customers to adhere to this, I mean, it's all about the money. If you can't use a bank to move these transactions because they don't want to do business with you because you're not securing your
it's
your
not
web
technically the
correctly.
banks, it's the card brands.
It's the card brands, but you've got a merchant bank that's kind of
it was really
sitting in
set
between
up
that.
For two reasons initially back in 2004. One, it was because what was being stolen back then? Credit cards.
Right.
And everybody was indemnified. Everybody that was a consumer and a card holder, you never had to pay for all the charges. That had to be absorbed by somebody.
Right.
And it ultimately went back to the card brands. So they came up with a way of sharing the love. So the banks of the merchants that were where all the card data was being stolen, they got to play in the game. And so the standard was born, and it was voluntary, it's private, and it was you don't have to follow it, but then you don't have to take MasterCards or Visa cards or Amex cards. That's your choice. So it was a voluntary program, which is very different.
It's not a government standard.
The rest of the world's running around, doing things with NIST 800.53 and all the other variations, and the NIST cybersecurity framework, and the NIST risk management framework. Now there's CMMC, and I'm like, PCI. If you've done PCI, you've kind of done it all. If you actually do it, and if you're smart enough to say it's a standard that's written to protect data, so take out credit cards and insert whatever the data is that you want to protect. Do that. I argue, and I've been arguing with my clients for the last 20 years, there's not much in the PCI security standard that you shouldn't be doing everywhere in your organization, period.
Right.
So fast forward.
So don't just scope it over here.
Right. Don't de-scope it. Well, and in fact, when the standard first came out, the assumption was everybody had a flat network, which was pretty much the case. So everything was in scope. And over the years, people learned how to de-scope. But it was a pretty painful exercise because to de-scope, they had to find all the data, they had to find all the data flows, and they had to isolate it.
Yeah. Which
cleaned up things a lot, because in the early days, credit card information was everywhere, literally everywhere, and there was no encryption. 20 years later, very little credit card information is present in any retail merchant's network because they've eliminated it.
Yeah.
That's
honestly a success story.
It's absolutely.
Because as much as you keep saying nothing's changed, honestly, I think that's one thing you can say. No, there have been changes. We are far more resilient in this area over here.
In this one specific area, which people like to laugh off.
Because that entire industry decided to adopt this rigor and enforce it on each other.
Well, and they didn't, the benefits that are present today in terms of the security of credit card data, the net effect has been a much smaller footprint. There's much less data around to steal. There's no more in most cases, the database with 20 million transactions from the last 8 years with all the credit card numbers in one of the columns and the CVVs in another column. That has gone away. But that went away because people figured out if we eliminate the data in an environment, which has meant there's technology that's come along, like the card readers that mostly do encryption now. So it's encrypted data that flows through the merchant environment, and they don't have the keys to decrypt it.
Right.
Therefore, everything's de-scoped. They did it because it was cheaper.
Yes.
The net effect is they're more secure because they have less data to steal in less places. It's now been pushed out to third parties. It's there somewhere. But I like to say they did it for the wrong reasons, but I had a good result.
Exactly.
It is what it is.
So when you come back, right, like, again, you're this compliance kind of driven person, so you probably have mixed reactions from people. But I think, going back to that cynical mindset, the hacker community is a very different community than like ISACA or other places where it feels maybe more academic or corporate, versus in the hacker community, very countercultural, very anti-authoritarian, much more pro-expressionism, and kind of bring your attitude,
or I could use
passion.
Different terms that are perhaps more politically correct or more likely to reach a larger audience, let's say. There's more curiosity.
There is.
There's more desire to learn and discover and investigate and research. How does this stuff work?
Right.
We might couch that around, how can I break it? How can I circumvent it? But it all boils down to a curiosity, which most people can hear that kind of terminology and say, oh yeah, that sounds kind of cool. And that's slightly different than saying counterculture. Right?
Yeah.
Now, we all like to think that we're different from everybody else, and myself included. And there's nothing I like more than gathering together with 5 or 6 other people that all think that they're different and unique. And they all dress the same. And they all look the same.
I was going to say black t-shirt.
Black t-shirts,
cargo
black
shorts.
hoodie,
Oh, man. Yeah.
ponytails. I used to have a ponytail when I had hair. I don't have any piercings. I don't have any ink, but that's very common.
But even in the last 10 years, I think you've seen even more of an explosion of different types of people coming in. And
there has been.
conferences.
And I've also heard a lot of the old-timers in the hacker community lamenting that, things aren't the same anymore because there's so many different people in. And there's nothing more fun, and I'm not going to pick on any conference in particular because I've heard this at numerous hacker conferences where people get together and talk about how open they are and letting everybody in. And, there was a time when I was the new person. I'm like, I was absolutely on the fringe. And if it hadn't been for Jack, introducing me to the group and saying he's okay, I wasn't getting in.
Right.
So this open and affirming, we're one big happy family, was just as cliquey and isolated as all those other groups that we always wish that we could be part of. Because I am from the fringe for various reasons, and I've lived most of my life on the fringe, watching everything go on around me and wishing I was with that group, wishing that group, but pretty comfortable just staying with my back to the wall watching everything, which that's a pretty common attitude in our little weird community.
Yeah.
But there's, like I was giving at the talk today, I hinted at it a little bit. We need to find the people that are out there that aren't necessarily getting the STEM degrees or getting the certification, but the people that are naturally curious or see things differently, and frankly, to be very blunt, are somewhere on the autism spectrum. I've learned over the last year or so, I'm like, I'm probably on the autism spectrum, and that's probably why I attract all sorts of weird autistic people, because they tend to flock towards me, and we can relate and talk to each other. And one of my favorite movies is The Accountant. I get it, but I'm high functioning. Like I have a therapist, and I was telling him, I think I'm autistic. He said, but you talk about how you go to conferences all the time and get up in front of crowds of hundreds of people and talk to them. I'm like, yeah, I do that. So I'm high functioning, but I still get the people because I think like they do and I see things like they do. And one of the talks I gave years ago was hackers are neither created or destroyed. I think you're a hacker or you're not. And I put myself out there. I have a liberal arts degree. I like puzzles. I'm left-handed. A lot of people in our community are left-handed. Artistic, musicians, something about the brain chemistry. These types of things go together. And I even touched on the autism thing. I didn't just say it, but I talked about some of my peculiar habits. Like when I go up and down stairs, I count the stairs. So I can walk around in the dark in my house because I know how many steps there are.
Wow, cool.
And when I'm out driving, I will just arbitrarily start counting the dotted lines for no particular reason, but I got to count them. So I count things.
Yeah.
I gave that talk for the first time at GERCON a couple years ago. And afterwards, I was hanging around with a small group of people. Most people knew me, but the usual, hey, really liked your talk type of thing. And GERCON likes to bring high school kids to the conference and college kids.
I like seeing that.
They give scholarships. And I was with the small people. At this point, it was people that knew me, and we were just kind of hanging out. But this kid came up, and he was kind of quivery and shaky, and like, yeah, this guy's clearly on the spectrum. And he came up to me and said, I listened to you. I really liked your talk, and when you got to that part about counting things, I thought, that's me, and I knew I'm in the right place. Thank you. And then he walked away, and the people around me, they're like, whoa, did that just happen? And I said, and that's why I do what
so
I
many
do.
people need those affirmations of like, I'm with my people. And I think
or just knowing people, there's more people like me.
Yes.
I'm not alone.
Yes.
I'm not the only one that's like this.
Because we're not all like that.
We don't get along necessarily because we're socially awkward.
Yeah.
But we all know that we're the same kind of socially awkward.
Yeah.
And so we're comfortable with one another.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah, no. So just kind of like what, 30 years worth of hacker history. Has there been anything, I think, maybe in the last probably like 5 years of where we are and where you think we're going as hackers? Because a lot of us, hacking has definitely become mainstream in the Infosec industry. We grew up, we got jobs, we get paid well. Well, some of us do. And
there's a certain aspect.
So it becomes a professional thing versus that crime of curiosity.
Well, it certainly grew up in a countercultural mindset, which you talked about earlier, and that is changing because it's more different people that are different to us that the world would call normal. Like, what's the neurodivergent?
Yeah, neurodivergent.
I keep telling my wife that I want to be considered neurotypical because I'm part of the small part of the community that's tends to be more high functioning. We tend to be smarter than most people. Just throwing it out there. We're the ones that figure things out. We're the ones that tinker and make things work and invent things. And then there's the rest of the people. And I'm like, why are they called typical and why are we called divergent? Why don't we claim the natural and let all the simple people, the mere mortals, the
Right.
muggles, as I've heard people describe in our community. Why don't they get to be the ones that are divergent? But again, the countercultural, the divergent, the being different. We feel like we're different, and so we cling to that and we crave that. Now, in the last couple of years, we've talked more about being inclusive of different, people groups, whether it's gender, and let's just be honest, women, those that I identify as female, haven't always been welcome in this community. And it's not always deliberately. It's because we're a bunch of awkward white guys that never really learned how to look people in the eye, and we're socially awkward. And I'm generalizing,
No,
of course. Sure. But various ethnic groups, minorities, people that come from different backgrounds, the whole shooting match. So there's a lot more people, different types of people entering our community, which I think is amazing.
I think what might surprise you is, for instance, like black hackers, they've had their own hacking community for a while. Where
that doesn't surprise me,
where it's like we think we're the hacking community, and but they're actually having their own hacking community because they haven't been welcome, or they haven't felt welcome to be in in white spaces or everything. So they kind of have their own thing, and we're now starting to see that that's now popping up more publicly, just like white hackers have popped up publicly for a long time.
And we're not talking white hat or white or
that's
black
true.
Hat hackers.
We're talking ethnicity and skin color.
Yes.
And so now we're starting to see them come in, like the blacks in cyber, black hackers start to come into the quote default spaces, DEF CON and other places. We definitely see world cultures at DEF CON for the last 10 years for sure. But just that I see starting to become not integrated, but definitely commingling, where we're starting to see some of that awareness of each other, and that's fantastic. And I speak out of ignorance, because if I were to talk about like what it's like being black and a hacker, I don't know, because I don't know a lot of black hackers, because they have their own community where it's them, and they have it simply because they've not. And so I see in the next 10 years we're going to see not the erasure of either, but rather just more mixing of that. And I think that's going to be a fantastic thing to become aware of each other's culture.
It's happening, and I one of the things that I try to promote, and I will still say it, is diversity, equity, and inclusion, because I happen to be a middle-aged white guy, so I'm sort of that cis white male that everybody talks about, although I don't understand the term because I'm a baby boomer. But I love the last 2 years that I've been at DEF CON, where it's been at the Las Vegas Convention Center, so it's been all under one roof, literally. I've had this experience the last 2 years where just walking around and just seeing all the people, seeing all the young people, seeing all different kinds of people, and just as cynical, as grumpy as I can be, I got really charged up last year when I first saw it. I was like, there's so many young people here, and everybody is. There's so many people there for the first time that are eager to learn, and there's so many people there that are old timers that are eager to teach and share. And just I was going from village to village, just seeing so many encounters of really excited people trying to show people all the different types of things that they're into, and people just soaking it up. And I was just, this is what it's all about. This year I walked around having similar feelings, but I was also thinking, if there's a solution to this geopolitical world that we're living in right now, if we're going to survive this, it's going to come from here.
Yeah.
It's going to come from DEF CON and from hackers figuring it all out. And I say that as an encouragement as much as a challenge to our community, because we're the smart ones. We're the ones that tinker and try to figure out how things work and how to make things better and how to find a better way to do things, and don't accept the status quo. And the status quo, if you haven't noticed, depending on which side you're on and which alternate reality you live in, is shit right now.
Yeah. So hackers are always trying to make it better. I think is what I think at least the folks trying to make a positive benefit in the society,
right.
And that's what we've always been. But so thanks for sharing that with us, and those at home watching, thanks. And if you have any thoughts on, just the history of hacking and what you got in, and if anything resonated here, hit us down in the comments or look us up on social media. Where can they find you these days?
I'm old and tired, and I got.
Can they find you on IRC these days?
I'm not on an IRC channel right now. I'm on Discord, but I don't even have it loaded on my app on my phone. The de facto way to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm still on Twitter, but who goes on Twitter anymore? And I refuse to call it the other name. Sorry, Elon. I started with Mastodon for a little bit, but then everybody started jumping off the Blue Skies, Sky, and I'm like, I'm an old dog. I'm just going to stay where I know. You come to me, you find me. When I was a kid, I was taught if you get lost, stay in one place. So I'm going to stay in one place. If you want to find me, this is where you'll find me.
You're also on a podcast normally, so you
podcast,
can also see
False
him on
Security
his
Weekly.
Yep.
You can find that at securityweekly.com. Darknet Diaries, episode 83. There's another podcast where they let me talk for 3 hours about my NSA experience. It's called The Team House. If you go to YouTube and just type in Team House NSA, I actually interviewed another guy from NSA within the last year. They interviewed me April of 24, but I might be second on the list, but you can find me there. And I ramble for 3 hours about my pen testing experience at NSA and things like that.
All right. Well, all that'll be down in the doobly-doo. Put your comments down there, and we'll see you in the next one.